Well, good afternoon. I know you're all here to talk about the news today regarding revenue estimates and the fact that Director Lang has actually provided us information showing that we are actually at the expectations of the proposed budget 2 years ago. Some people will paint that as a negative. I would point out that meeting our expectations is actually a good thing. There's other states in the country who are actually falling short of their revenue expectations, and I think that goes to show that the decisions we've made in the past were sound. Going forward, I don't believe anything really changes as far as our priorities in the budget process. K-12 education will continue to be our focus, and we will prioritize that as our number one opportunity to be able to restore the $127 million reduction in the first year. The governor has a small increase in the second year, and we hope to build on that as we move forward. But bottom line is that education is still our priority, and you'll continue to see us focusing on that as we go throughout the budget process.
Last night, Assembly Republicans caucused to talk about where our priorities were for this budget, and it was universal among the 63 Republicans that we talked with that K-12 education funding should be our highest priority in this state budget. It's our biggest expenditure. It's one of our most important investments. That's why Assembly Republicans have worked with our counterparts in the Senate and also with Governor Walker to figure out a mechanism where we can actually restore the proposed cut that Governor Walker had in the first year of the budget and basically smooth out the 2 years so we will have an opportunity to actually have no reduction in K-12 funding over the course of this budget. Now, you're right. As Chairman Nygren said, we had hoped for better news. As we looked at the revenues, we've become accustomed many times where revenue estimates come in and they are higher than we had predicted because we use a very conservative approach to make sure that we don't have long-term fiscal problems. The Fiscal Bureau, again, to their credit, is using that same conservative approach to make sure that we don't have any negative repercussions later on by having overly optimistic revenue scenarios. But it also means that Republicans get to show again where our priorities are. The most important one, and the one that has been, and once again our caucus discussed it last night, is K-12 education. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
How are you going to pay for the $127 million?
Well, in addition to some of the GPR savings that we've already accumulated in the budget, the governor in his budget, there's a double payment to the levy credit. The governor did this as a way to reduce the overall gap deficit. Which is a very sound process, but that will allow us $106 million to be able to shift to K-12 in addition to the other dollars we've saved to this point, and will continue as we go forward. That'll allow us to fill that first year in the budget regarding K-12 reduction.
So does that reduce is the property tax cut that folks would get at home?
That does not affect property taxes at all.
So is that on the table, though, to find any other revenues, whether it be for the UW system or other money for K-12 education?
So, as we all know, Governor Walker's priority, and the one of the legislature as well, is to make sure that we have reasonable property taxes. Governor Walker's budget basically holds property taxes flat. There's a small reduction, but I think if you add the reduction in both years of the biennium, it's about, I think it's literally between $15 and $20 million, so a small number. So that's why, for the most part, we want to keep those taxes frozen, just like Governor Walker's proposed. And we think we have other mechanisms that we can bring forward, such as the school levy credit and the savings that the Finance Committee has been working to find, that will allow us to keep investing in our priorities, but make sure that we have money so that no cuts happen to public schools.
Representative Nygren or Representative Vos, the savings you talked about that would go into K-12, can you put that in layman's terms for people who hear that and they have no idea what it means?
Well, the levy credit is a way to basically buy down property taxes. So the governor actually made a double payment in that regard. So what we would do is we would not make that double payment. We'd make a payment that's been similar traditionally, a single payment, which would then allow us to be able to grab that $106 million to basically do away with that reduction.
So you say your first priority is K-12 education. Are you still looking to make additional cuts to try and reduce the $300 million cut to the UWs?
We're going to make decisions as we go throughout the budget process. As you're there every single day, you see them. Anything, I guess, as we move forward, we'll make the decisions case by case, keeping the taxpayers in mind, but also prioritizing things that are most important to the people of the state of Wisconsin.
Right, and if you remember throughout the entire process, as the Assembly Republicans have said, we'd like to reduce the cut. Much of it was predicated on the fact that we believed that there would be additional revenue based on past practices. We now know that that additional revenue is not going to be there. But what it means is we've got to use even a finer opportunity to cut out waste, to look for areas that we can cut back on, to reinvest in our priorities. And we have a number of those, K-12 being the most important. The university is another high priority. We have some issues dealing with Medicaid. We have issues dealing with transportation. All of those have to be addressed. So that's part of the caucus discussion that we'll continue to have. Now that we know the numbers, we're going to have to get back together, especially with Governor Walker and our Senate counterparts, to find out where we all are to coalesce around an answer.
Speaker Vos, how much do you think you might be able to bring down the UW cut?
It's too early to tell. Once again, we want to make sure that all of the numbers that we are seeing, we haven't had an opportunity to really sit down and go through where the revenue projections are as far as our income taxes, sales taxes, all that stuff, to make sure that we can understand the long-term ramifications. We know, however, that reducing those reductions that Governor Walker proposed is still a goal. But I don't want to, we want to be honest with folks to say if new revenues are not there, we want to focus on our top priority, which is why K-12 education, educating kids in every school district around the state, that's where we want to put the majority of the money. If we're able to find additional savings, part of those could go to the university, part of those could go to other areas, but we don't want anybody to walk away without thinking that our top priority, without any question, is K-12 education.
Robin, do these numbers affect your thinking on the financing for the Bucks Arena?
Well, the two issues are really separate because we know that the Bucks Arena is focused not on current revenues but on the loss of additional revenues if the Bucks would leave. So my hope is that will still have an opportunity. We've had a discussion about it in caucus. We're still waiting for many of the details that are being negotiated between all the parties that have been meeting on a regular basis. But I think it's fair to say that Assembly Republicans have always stood up to try to say we want to minimize the opportunity for state taxpayers and increase the opportunity for local people who are getting the biggest benefit to help pay for the arena. That position has not changed, and ultimately I hope that's what will be successful.
Would you be open at all to approaching the Bucks ownership group and asking them to provide more than half of the funding for the arena?
That's already been part of the discussion. We've talked about that as we've gone forward. We have to remember, however, that the private sector is contributing half already. So I think that's something that we should laud and say thank you. It's important to make sure that we look at what's happening in other places. Most arenas rely much more heavily on public investment than the one that we're looking at in Milwaukee. The thing for me is to make sure that those who are most directly benefiting, the local governments, the city and the county of Milwaukee, are the ones who bear a greater share of the responsibility to help create this venue. And we got to remember, it's not just for the Bucks, it's an entertainment venue that also will bring in concerts, will help stimulate the local economy downtown, but it also is the home for the Admirals and Marquette and a lot of other teams that we want to make sure can also be viable.
What does the new LFE budget mean for the transportation budget and the governor's proposed borrowing of $1.3 billion?
Well, our caucus has already had discussions. We did not anticipate during the course of our negotiations with our caucus putting an additional GPR into transportation. We have talked about trying to find ways to look for increased revenues that would all go toward paying down debt. So we are not looking to increase highway spending or increase transit spending. What we're trying to do is to say we don't think it's as fiscally a good idea to just borrow more money. We'd like to actually raise some revenues, look at registration fees, some things that would be a very reasonable increase to buy down debt. We think that's a better long-term answer. So this decision really didn't have any impact on that.
You talk about senior care and IRIS and those kinds of programs. Are you still?
I mean, we've already committed. We've already made a commitment regarding senior care, and we're going to continue to work to make that commitment to continue that program. Regarding IRIS and family care, I think that at the end of the day, obviously, we'll have those discussions, but it's to be determined. I think at the when we're all said and done, what we should focus on is the services for seniors and disabled. It is our goal to continue the level of services that they've come to expect.
So K-12 is a priority. What about voucher expansion?
Well, as you know, in Governor Walker's budget, he actually changed the funding formula for students who are entering in the choice program. One of our goals is to actually look for ways to keep the process whole. So our goal for K-12 education, we really try not to draw a distinction between, kids who are in one school system versus another. We'd like to try to keep all of those schools whole. So we would like to not reduce funding for choice. We'd like to not reduce funding for public schools. And we think at the end of the day, once we negotiate with our center counterparts, we'll be able to achieve that.
So what does that mean? Are you looking for a different way to fund the lifting of the caps on the voucher program, or do you want to go along with the way the governor's doing it?
We probably can't go along with the way that the governor's doing it. We haven't not finalized those negotiations. We're still looking at it. We haven't had a discussion about the choice program as much because we've been focusing so much of our attention on making sure that we have public schools fully funded so that they don't have to take a reduction.
So when you talk about making them whole, does that mean making them whole as they sit today or making them whole as they sit in the governor's budget? And I'm talking about the voucher program.
Well, we want to guarantee that we make whole those who are already inside the system. So those kids who are already in a choice school, they should not take a reduction, just like kids who are in a public school shouldn't have to take a reduction either. So that's our number one priority. Talking about the expansion, that's another step that we haven't really gotten to as a caucus, but definitely trying to keep all school systems whole as our top priority.
So that would mean you're looking at lifting the cap rather than eliminating the cap for the statewide program.
We have not discussed that.
But how could you eliminate it and keep them whole? You wouldn't have enough money to do that.
No, we do. The difficulty is looking at how we're funding it. Governor Walker's expansion was focused really on trying to do that reduction in the amount by the blending of the different school districts having the state aid follow the child. What we're looking to do is to try to take some of the existing pools of money and to make sure that the program as it currently operates is able to function in a similar way. As you know, in Milwaukee, there's a split between property taxes and state aid, so maintaining more of that current split as opposed to continuing the buy-down that was discussed before.
Democrats offered today that maybe the manufacturing and ag tax credit phase-in might be delayed, that could offer a bit more revenue, not eliminating the program, but just delaying the phase-in to save some money. Is that something you would be open to at all?
Well, we really haven't discussed that as a caucus, but I will say it's not surprising to me that when we are faced with a deficit, the first thing that Democrats propose is to either increase taxes or delay the tax cuts that have already been proposed. So that's not shocking. I think that would be the last priority of our caucus, not the first as it is with the Democrats.
Do you see any easy cuts? For instance, tomorrow the Confluence project is up on the agenda, $15 million earmarked for that.
We have not met as a team yet, but everything's on the table. Every decision is made independently, and in that case, I'm sure it will be as well.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.